Hello and welcome to Gin and TARDIS, a spin-off from The Doctor Who Show. I'm Dave.
I'm Richard.
I'm Mark. And I'm Rob.
And we're pleased to have all four of us here at Camp David.
Welcome, Rob.
Thank you very much.
And following a vote of stories nominated by us, I think we chose to do less known stories or more forgotten stories last time. Yes. And you all voted for Rob's nomination, The Ribos Operation, which we've just watched and we are about to talk about over a few glasses of gin. Richard, do you want to tell us about this week's gin? Because it is quite important.
It is, actually. We'll start by saying thank you to listener John, who came up to us at the Sirens of Audio Matthew Waterhouse Day and presented us with a very nice bottle of gin. I'm sorry, John, we didn't get your last name, but John gave us a bottle of Four Pillars olive leaf gin, nice, which we have very much enjoyed while watching that.
Yes.
Yes, and consuming. It was much better than the paint stripper Mark normally buys. So,
and 43%, I believe.
Yes, 43.3%.
Which will be hearing the effects very shortly.
No, thank you very much for that,
Thank
John.
you,
That
John.
was much appreciated. Actually, we really enjoyed drinking that. That was very nice.
And Four Pillars is, of course, a Victorian distillery.
Oh, there you go.
About 30 minutes from Dave's house.
Ah.
So, yeah.
Oh, Hillsville. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Now, before we get into what we thought of this one, what are your memories of this? What did you think going on? What did you think going into this one, Rob?
I assume that I saw this in the late 70s, but I have absolutely no recollection of ever watching it since. I know I did not buy the DVD box set because at $170, I could never get that past my wife into the house and maintain our wedding vows. But other than the book, I have really no recollection of this at all. So I was very happy to watch it.
Okay. Mark?
Well, unlike you convicts, I was in the UK on its first transmission, but I don't remember watching it at all.
Watching Buck Rogers? Or?
I might have been watching Man from Atlantis, I'll be honest with you.
$6 million.
I do remember Pirate Planet. First time I saw this, I think, was in 1987, I think, as part of that Saturday afternoon run.
Oh, yeah.
And then I bought it on VHS, and then I bought the DVD box set. I just snuck it in from the wife, so I got away with it. Watched it then, and I was reflecting today. It's probably the Doctor Who story, one of the Doctor Who stories I watched the least, apart from 99% of the new series. Yes.
Well, it wasn't repeated much here.
No.
I think that 87, it was repeated, I think, once like a year after it was first shown, and then it's only been on a couple of times since. So I'm old enough, sadly, to have seen it the first time it was on. So
in colour or black and white?
Thank you, Mark. It was in colour. We had a colour TV by that point, so they showed that immediately after the invasion of time. So we went straight from hijinks with Sontarans into
hijinks with Scrivens.
Yes, that's right.
For the ABC, isn't it? Like going from one season straight through.
Yeah, it was actually. It was really good. That was their big launch for that year. We'll talk about some facts a little later.
Yeah.
But again, this is one I haven't watched very long time. I think it would have been probably when that first US DVD box set came out. I do remember buying that.
Yeah.
And I probably watched it then. I don't think I've watched it since.
Yeah, so as you said, Richard, this was one that wasn't repeated all that often in Australia. The first time it was repeated in my lifetime that I remember, because we did work out it was repeated when I was about 2 months old.
What did you think then?
Your dad would have had you propped up from the telly, I'm sure.
Absolutely, no doubt. So the first time I saw it was that Saturday afternoon repeat screening on the 12th of December 1987, when they showed it in omnibus format. And it's interesting because that's obviously the version that we taped off air that we had.
Oh, yeah.
And so I actually don't have that sort of formative childhood memory of the cliffhangers that I do for a lot.
Yeah.
So the cliffhangers still sort of surprise me a little bit when I watch it now, such as they are, and we'll get to that.
Yes.
And the reason I sort of remember it being a part of that Saturday afternoon run is that I have vivid memories of watching the Armageddon Factor in omnibus edition, so all 6 episodes all in one go, over the Australian bicentennial weekend. So it was actually screened out here on the 23rd of January 1988, and of course our bicentenary being the 26th of January 1988. So I do remember that. It was repeated again, sort of one episode a night, Monday to Thursday, 1990. But it actually hasn't been repeated a lot out here, like a lot of the Williams era. And then, yes, I bought the VHS, I bought the US DVD, I bought the UK DVD. I don't have a wife to get these things through, so I can just buy them.
Just the cat.
Just the cat, yep. So that was all fine. And I'll keep going by saying that I remember as a kid rating this very, very lowly. And in fact, other than the sort of the magic of the Key to Time itself, which I think did capture my imagination as a kid, a lot of this season I remember being very, very dull. This didn't appeal to me at all. The Androids of Tara didn't appeal to me at all. I was quite fond of the Power of Kroll, because at least I had a giant squid. But as I've got older, I have come to appreciate those scripts a lot more. Probably the Androids of Tara a little bit more, but I've got to say I quite enjoyed this with a few important qualifications. What about you guys?
I was just going to say, we're the important qualifications, I think.
The gin.
Yeah, the gin. And look, it is from a Robert Holmes perspective, there's no action in it, really, is it? It's just a lot of, it's like I was saying to you guys, it's a bit like, it reminds me of Game of Thrones and a Carry On film mixed together, but it's shot like a classic serial. It's actually very, very static.
It is fairly talky.
It is very talky, but the double act, Garen really just lifts it. Yeah,
I have to say, Ian Cuthbertson, he is clearly having a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this would only be about a year or two before he did Children of the Stones, and he's very menacing in that. So it is very clearly a performance.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big dude though. You look at him standing there; he's taller than Tom Baker.
Yes,
he is a big guy. So I get, well, and I do remember in Children of the Stones, he was quite menacing.
Yeah,
so,
but before we get too further, what did you think, Rob? How did you find it? I mean, this is the first time in 30-odd years, 40-odd years?
40-odd years. Mark's right. There is no plot as such. We'll get the Jethric and get the piece. Look, it is pure Holmes, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's just a series of interlinked double acts going on amongst the characters.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is incredibly dense with verbiage.
Yeah.
Which I can understand when you were a child, Dave, you were bored out of your mind because you go to Doctor Who for entertainment and there's just a lot of adults talking at each other in strange ways. But now that, we're all middle-aged old fogies, you can appreciate the construction of the characters and the construction of the dialogue.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is very witty and it is helped by the sort of heightened atmosphere of the whole production. I mean, Cuthbertson is clearly, as you said, Richard, enjoying the heck out of it.
Oh, I think so.
And the fellow who plays the graph in the cave,
Paul Seed.
Yes.
who he's very intense when he needs to be intense, but there are some portions where he does pull it back, and I think his acting is perfectly decent.
Look, he probably is the level, I think, of intensity or sort of scenery chewing's probably a little harsh, but he is probably the right level I think the story needs for something like that. Well, if anything, he's maybe a fraction young, probably for the kind of character he's playing, but given he's supposed to have been the veteran of all these battles and year underground where he never saw the sun or whatever. So
3 years old.
But as I said, I think he is about the right level for what the story needs.
Yeah.
There were moments where I couldn't decide if it was just absolutely brilliant or just terrible, and I think he just about keeps the right side of just this is very entertaining.
Just about. Some of the ones where he's really getting worked up, you're sort of like, ooh, yeah, that's probably a little too far.
Compared to Cuthbertson as Garen Ware, I think that's just the right pitch all the way through and add some levity to it.
It's interesting that Cuthbertson's character was originally envisaged as being an Australian. An Australian accent. So to go to an English sort of accent.
I guess so.
Who was switching between Cornwall and Irish. And,
I think it's meant to be BBC Cockney almost.
Pretty much, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I sort of made the gag there about it lacking a plot, and you're right, Rob, about the various different double acts just interacting. The first two episodes, it was really noticeable watching it this time. You have the Garen Unstoff Con the Gruff plot that goes for 2 episodes, and the Doctor's just sort of wandering around, just observing them being sort of having a good time. They don't even interact until the very end of part 2.
No, that's right.
Then part 3 is really just them sitting around explaining the plot to each other in very funny Holmesy dialogue.
There are a couple of info dumps in it.
Yeah. But it is just that, and then it's not until you get to episode 4 where they actually go down into the catacombs and all the plots intersect and there's actually some action and people getting killed and all the good fun stuff that you watch classic Who for. It's if you try to explain the plot, it's almost non-existent. I mean, the Doctor doesn't even have anything he needs to fix. This is almost a Hartnell story, just arrive, get separated from the TARDIS, survive, go home.
Yes.
But funny.
Oh, vastly. Look, for a Sunday afternoon Doctor Who, I mean, that was a lot of fun. Lots of great dialogue and everything in there. But in terms of kicking off a 26-week
epic
themed season, I should say, was that the right story to do it? Don't know.
It's hard. There are times it's very obviously in the studio.
Yes.
And look, I get it because there is a lot of quite expensive and indeed quite good location filming as we get later into the season.
Especially Stains of Blood.
And
the Edwards of Tara.
Well, I was about to say, then as we sort of get to Armageddon Factor, where it's very clear they've got no money left.
The InVision magazine says for this particular story, it does come in under budget. So the studio work does save that money.
Oh, I'm sure it does. And look, Dave and I were quite critical of George Benton Foster's work on Blake 7. And look, I have to say, there are a few instances here where it's just like, we've got the shot, move on.
Yeah.
He really is not trying to do anything particularly innovative or, even... No,
there's a couple of high shots, I think, when the Doctor and Romano are hiding behind those little things.
Yeah,
they were quite nice, but very, as you said, it's
there's a nice
rare.
shot. There's a nice shot on stuff from inside the strong room.
Yeah,
and that's not too badly done. And he does mostly conceal the Shrivens are, which I'm sure we'll come back to. But I think what Spen Foster's done here is what he does very well in Image of the Fendal. He just casts really, really well. Yeah. And you put that cast on screen with a Robert Holmes script, and all you really need to do is just point the camera and just let them go and have some fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the budget. This is, of course, the second season of JNT's time as the production unit manager.
Yes.
And we've observed before on these that JNT wasn't particularly good at saving money for the last story. And certainly when you get to the Armageddon Factor, it's very clear the money has run out. The corollary of that is, of course, this is the first story of the season, so there's money for costumes, there's money for music, there's money for cast, and because it's set on a medieval style world, they can just go, right, get me every crown and sword and piece of armour and costume.
Yep.
Anything left over from my Claudius is bung it in there.
Yeah.
And it is clever because this is the series opener, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to wow the audience, you want to draw them in with a well-realised faux Russian 15th, 16th century look. So from that perspective, it works because it is absorbing. Yeah,
it looks good. The strong room looks good. The big red capes that the Levidian Invincibles have is really good. And just as a side note there, we commented during the viewing, Robert Holmes just has a gift for names of things.
Yes.
There's no space names in his story. So you've got the Graf Vindicay, you've got the reference to the Levidian Invincibles, and, the Greater Saranic Empire. These are things that just conjure up other worlds in a way.
It's not Iridius, is it?
No.
He actually puts a bit of effort into
Nation naming, no.
Yeah.
No, there's no Terrans to be seen.
And he lets the audience fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
They're names, but you attach them to the characters and characterisation, and suddenly you've got a whole world.
Yep.
Built up.
Should it have been a 4-parter or a 2-parter? Like, is there enough plot in this?
I have to say,
sustain
I
it?
probably was finding, particularly in part 3, I was sort of like, this is actually starting to drag a little bit. You sort of got over the initial fun and, isn't Garen funny and whatever. But once they actually sort of, the plot shifts and it's really about evading the Graf Vindicay, it does start to drag a bit. And part 4 just kind of feels a little lopsided because you sort of go from blowing the Graf Vindicay and suddenly we're back at the TARDIS. And then there's almost like that filler scene where they're passing the tracer back and forth. Do you want to do it? No, you do it. No, you do it. All right, then.
Yeah.
Well, that's 3 and 4 together, I think. There was that scene with Romana and Kanon in the catacombs towards the... And they're just filling space while Garen has vanished.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That said, you need to set up the key to time. Thoughts on that opening scene with the Guardian that was written, I believe, by Graham Williams?
That was great. That was lots of nice exposition. It got to the point. It didn't linger. There was no castrati in the background singing, no.
No, that's right. And swelling music. No,
that's
that's
really
exactly
good sort of
right.
Deadly Dudley and there's organ there.
Well, that said, Dudley Simpson has clearly gone and hired an organ performer for that one.
Yeah.
And very obviously through the rest of the story, it's like, well, I've paid for the organ and the organ is I'm going to get my money's worth.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great.
Which works really well. And again, it's that opening of the season thing where Dudley Simpson's got a lot more time to actually put it together some themes and do some stuff. And this is the point where I think he does do all 6 this season.
Yes, he does.
He does,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
he
you know,
hasn't
by-
pissed off any directors. I think,
So he's got a bit more time, and you definitely see the value of that. But what really struck me about that opening scene is the play between Cyril Luckham and Tom Baker. And I don't know whether it's because they knew each other and respected each other, or Tom was just in the right mood or something, but Tom's got that right balance of petulance and gravitas and humour that absolutely fires perfectly in this. But you particularly see it playing against Cyril Luckham in that one, and I almost get the feeling like Luckham is a serious enough and a big enough name that Tom's sort of like, I can't piss around on this one.
rein it in a bit.
I've got to give it a reined in
Yeah,
performance.
reined in, yeah.
Compared to where he's with Cuthbertson, and look, it's very fun.
Yeah.
But clearly the two of them are
Trying to outbig each other.
trying to
almost,
outbid each
really.
other. They're
Yep.
probably going to get down the pub every night together.
Yeah.
They clearly enjoy each other, and you see a slightly more unrestrained performance.
Yeah.
It's a very well structured and concise encapsulation of the entire season, isn't it? You know, I'm the White Guardian, this is what you need to do, I don't really want to do it, you're forcing my hand, and these are the stakes that are at play.
Yeah.
So, and in one scene, and it's, as you said, Dave, it's really well played between the two actors at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though he does look like Colonel Saunders from Kentucky Fried Chicken.
With his mint julep.
Yeah. So that's okay though. At least he hasn't got a bird on his head yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the only other thing that I recognise him from is he plays the head of the Board of Governors in To Serve Them All My Days, where he's basically playing the same character. So he clearly was one of those actors that was hired to play a certain military officers and guardians and the like.
Yeah.
You asked the question while we were watching it, Mark, why is Binro here?
Yes.
Well, it's to pair him with Unstoff, clearly, while Garen's running around with the Doctor. It's the next Holmesian sort of double act.
I don't know, I just thought...
Well, you either kill Unstoff off earlier and then you eliminate that entirely,
Yeah.
or you
Have to find something for him to do.
Well, you pad out the running time effectively.
Yeah.
With these two. And obviously there's that well-known conversation about the stars not being ice crystals and Unstoff proving his theories correctly. And there's a bit of that sort of the Galileo vibe there to the way this circles and all that sort of thing. Whilst unnecessary, me personally, I found that affecting that particular scene. But I can understand why it seems to be padding out episodes 3 and 4. So yeah.
But then again, having him there gave Garen that best line. What did he say when he got shot? He goes, "Oh, you seem like a nice guy."
The brief moment I saw of him.
The little I knew of him.
That was actually worth it. I go there. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Some of those lines were really, really
They were
funny.
very funny.
It's interesting. Do you think that Binro is sort of one of the very last vestiges of the educate and inform mantra of Doctor Who? You know, doing the whole Galileo analog, or is that just Holmes filling in time?
It's a bit of Holmes being Holmes, really.
I think it's Holmes being Holmes, really. Yeah. What about the cliffhangers?
Such as they were.
Yes.
Yeah, and this probably goes back to when we were watching it in the 80s, where we saw it as an omnibus. Does it work better as an omnibus? Or with those really, and I'll be honest with you, piss weak. One of the episodes I actually said it's about as good as Death of the Daleks Part 3 with the tiles.
Yep.
It was that underwhelming.
Well, there were more crash zooms of Tom Baker's face than there were of Colin Baker's face almost in the trial series.
And that's the really interesting choice, and maybe we have got George Spencer Foster to blame for some of this, because Robert Holmes knows how to write a good cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And he scripted it in a lot of them. And as I said, I don't sort of have that childhood, memory of all the cliffhangers that have implanted on your brain the way you do with other ones. And I genuinely thought that the Part 2 cliffhanger was nobody makes a fool of the Gruff Vindicay and lives, kill him. So but then he got about 30 seconds of just sort of messing around and shots and Tom sort of just trying to do something until they call cut. It's really, really loosely done.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know whether Robert Holmes just didn't care for that one or what, but all of them are pretty weak.
Whether it was badly underrunning, and they've just let it run on for 30 seconds, maybe.
But all the resolutions are super quick.
Yes.
So it feels like it's not that.
Yeah.
But they are very, very weak. And maybe, again, that's part of that childhood thing of just that it's not building up to those big, exciting moments every 25 minutes. It actually does work as an omnibus. It's sort of just quite a flat, even story with a moderate build-up in the last 20 minutes.
I mean, it is an artificial construction to have a cliffhanger every 25 minutes within your story. I mean, the classic, up and down in terms of the plot. But as you say, I think watching this in the omnibus format would just make it just be just a good story to experience without having to worry about dealing with the consequences of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
We mentioned the Shriven's Island promise to come back to it. I made the comment, and I was referencing what the Flight 3 Entirety guys used to say about some of Robert Holmes' stories, that he knew he just had to put in a monster. So, in the Ribos Operation, the part of the giant rat is played by the Shriven's Island. And I was reflecting on that as we were watching it and just sort of wondering, as much as I like the Sunmakers, is the lack of a Robert Holmes monster in that what makes it a little bit dry? Like, would this work without the Shriven's Island, or as a kid do you need it?
You'd have to invent something else to try and, for a sense of menace, I suppose. Look, when you're aiming at kids, children, teenagers, I suppose without a monster it is a bit more dry, as you say, Dave. Yeah.
It is, but then I suppose what other menace do you have when they've got to get down into the
Catacombs.
relic room?
Yeah,
or indeed in the catacombs as well.
Yeah.
And at least it's not a space lion or something.
Well, that's exactly right. Or the slither or something.
Yes. And as Robert Holmes, you get the Shriven's Isle, which just sounds cool as much as it's clear it's the guy on all
It
fours.
looked good, and the lighting did a lot of work.
Well, look, I think one thing we probably positively would say, George Benton Foster, as we said earlier, he does keep it in the background.
Yes.
You really sort of only see Claw. You don't really get a proper look at it. And when you do, which is the one that's in the cave later on in the story, you can see it's pretty ordinary. We're not quite a giant spider territory or that thing out of the Harvest of Kairos in Blade 7, but it's not a particularly convincing costume.
I suppose you're right. I mean, in terms of the entire package of the Beast, together, no, it's not great. But I mean, bits and pieces.
That's the thing. If you just see hints of claws and teeth and blood-stained mouth, whatever. Yeah.
I agree.
You mentioned Robert Holmes letting the audience fill in various bits of background rather than doing too much exposition. And whilst I agree, Richard, there was a lot of info dumps. At least it's done in sort of quite convivial dialogue.
Most of the time. Jethric, the most valuable substance in the known universe.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's a Robert Holmes story because it's got the most valuable. It's got Argonite or Spectrox or methane. Or, there's always the most valuable something in the universe in Robert Holmes' story. But the point I was going to make about the Robert Holmes world building is that unlike most other stories, certainly in classic, but especially I think in New Who, the Seeker doesn't get an explanation.
No.
Now, she's clearly shown to actually have
powers.
Some sort of powers. And she is correct in finding Unstoffed twice.
Yes.
Now, whether her prediction of All But One Doomed to Die is a genuine prediction or because she says that she triggers the Graph, who then makes sure that it's true, that I think is open for speculation, but she's clearly shown to have some powers. Now, it's only a season ago that we had Image of the Fendar, where they made a point of the whole, if you grow up near a time fisher, yada, yada, yada. And I know the new series sort of always drops in these explanations. I suspect if I was watching this now in middle age, for a hot take, I'll be like, well, we didn't get an explanation for the Seeker. But we kind of get away with it because Holmes just lets this world be slightly weird and different.
Yeah.
You don't, in the flow of the story, you don't ask how she knows.
No.
I mean, you can assume it's either genuine psychic powers or there's some sort of scientific explanation for it, but it doesn't really matter, I suppose, in the context of the story. It's just it's effective that she's right more than the fact that she can foretell the future.
And we finally move the plot along.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I thought also the Seeker, and I'm not going to go back and watch the bloody story, reappeared in the End of Time with Rassilon, the Time Lord. So if I'm right, please let me know, and it wasn't an abstract of my gin, hallucination. Okay. But if anybody wants to write to the Doctor Who show instead of me having to watch it again, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, when you also get the He Will Knock 4 Times woman in the bus with the giant story.
That was very subtle.
Planet of the Dead, yes.
That was very subtle, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Great. There was some great dialogue. Australia got mentioned, like Superman 2 with Lex Luthor. Yeah, Australia.
Yes.
Where he was going to sell the Opera House to...
Sydney Harbour and the Opera House.
Yes,
Arab.
Yes.
Who happened to have a machine gun. Yes.
Yes.
Certainly shot during the 70s. So
yes.
Yeah.
And there's a later comment about the tracer not working, so it must be Japanese or whatever.
Yes, obviously it's of its time.
Yes.
And wasn't there the Graph Vindicator mentioned something about knowing how to deal with the natives or something?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yes.
So clearly a story written by a man who'd served in Burma during World War II.
Holmes does like to do lots of colonisation stuff, and I mean, he will do the Power of Kroll in 4 stories' time. So.
Yes. I thought you were going down the ain't half hot mum around there for a moment, Rob.
There's that as well.
It's all referencing the same stuff.
Yeah, and it's
much.
made in the same time as well, isn't it? Really, simpler times.
Pretty much.
Yes.
Now, Richard, I see you've produced some notes this time as usual.
All right. Well, I guess unless anyone's got anything else, we maybe should talk about the cast perhaps for a minute. We said how good the cast was. Now, obviously, Mary Tam is the new addition to the regular cast here.
Yes.
I think she slots relatively seamlessly into the show. I think she's capable of standing up to Tom or working with Tom without him overwhelming her.
Standing up to Tom's probably a good way of putting it, because I think that was very much how their relationship worked.
Oh, okay.
Certainly off camera, I think.
Yeah, I get the feeling that unlike Louise Jamieson, who sort of came in and thought, well, I'm the new regular and he's the ongoing regular, and there's a bit of a power dynamic and he's going to show me the way, and then actually he hates me and we're going to have a horrible time for a year. Mary Tam just walked in and gone, well, I'm a star. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to be a star. Yep. And if Tom doesn't like it, Tom can get stuffed.
Pretty much.
And Tom, I think, reacts according to that, because you're right, she absolutely walks in and she's just the companion from scene one.
Yeah, agreed.
And it's funny, you can tell how little this season was repeated out here, because I think for all of us growing up in fandom in the 80s and the 90s, Lalla Ward was Ramada.
Yep.
And Mary Tam was a bit of an afterthought, but now you look at her performance, you just go, she was really on to
She was
something.
really good. Yeah, she was great. Yeah, very good.
Very much so.
Very enjoyable.
Yeah,
performance.
I did have some notes about the other cast. Now, we talked about Ian Cuthbertson. Now, he was obviously a very established actor
Yes.
by this point and had been in an awful lot of stuff. Apparently, he was one of the ones I think they considered for the Fifth Doctor.
Really?
I think that might have been, because when Davison initially didn't want to do it, I think he might have been one of the ones they looked at.
With Richard Griffiths.
Yeah, if Davison
Heavy
had
men.
flatly refused.
Yeah.
I think, but
That's a shame.
yeah, around this time he was in The Voyage of Charles Darwin, if anyone remembers that. No. And he's in Ripping Yarns.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, he had a role in Survivors. He was in Danger UXB around this time.
All the classics.
Yes.
In The Professional or The Sweeney, you know as well?
No. Now, we mentioned Unstoff, obviously, Nigel Plaskett. He also had a long career, but most of it wasn't really in front of the camera. He actually became a puppeteer.
Oh.
Yeah, and he did work for like Spinning Image. He did some of the Muppet stuff that was shot in the UK. Quite a few kids series. Yeah, stuff like that. Later on, he did the Hitchhikers movie, and I think he did some stuff with Thomas the Tank Engine. Later on, I think that was mainly voices.
I thought he was okay. He had some good moments, but he had some weak moments.
Yes.
But playing the straight man to Cuthbertson, he does make it work.
And that's hard because that is a big performance.
Yes.
It is a very big performance.
Yeah.
And when he put on the Irish accent, I thought he was Father Dougal from Father Ted for a minute.
Very
looked a bit
good.
like them, yeah.
Yeah, we probably should also mention Paul Seed, really.
Oh,
'cause-
yes.
Yes, it's the Gruff Vinder K.
Yeah.
He'd been in quite a bit of stuff around this time. He was in Survivors as well. He was in The Secret Army. But he's probably better known, I think, for some of his directing work.
House of Cards.
Yes, and To Play the King, yes.
Yes.
Did Murder Rooms, he did some of Doc Martin. He, not long after this, actually went and did the BBC's director's course.
Okay.
Which led to a change of career for him.
Yeah.
But, just quickly in closing, the one actually who really had the career actually was Timothy Bateson, who played Binro.
Yeah.
He's got about 60 years
Jesus.
worth of credit from the late 40s until into the 2000s. His last role actually was the voice of Creature, the house elf, in one of the Harry Potter movies.
Oh, wow.
The one where he inherits the house. Is it Order of the Phoenix?
Probably, sure.
Yeah, no.
Let's go with that.
But he was in stuff like, he was in Olivier's Richard III, he was in The Mouse That Roared, in a huge number of well-known series. Around this time, like All Creatures Great and Small, he was in Going Straight, the Porridge
the
spin-off.
Porridge spin-off, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He was in The Bill, including in the Don Beach miniseries.
Oh, there we go.
Beach is back, or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
Beach Down Under, though?
No,
Oh,
not
God,
Beach Down
no.
Under. So
No.
there you go. But that's it. That was quite a good cast.
It is a very good
Yes.
cast. I think
Even
that's...
Prentice Hancock had sort of dialed it down a bit
He
for
was.
that one.
Like I said, is this the same guy? Because usually, like, especially in Planet of the Daleks, he's like, turning up to 11,
No,
it's like...
it's Planet of Evil that come
Oh,
on,
yes.
Wyszynski, give an order, save the ship.
That's right. My God. Yeah.
But yeah, we did note that Paul Seed obviously did go on to direct House of Cards, did have a very Urquhart-like piece to camera, so
Yes.
maybe he was getting the seeds, pardon the pun,
Hey!
of what he was going to do.
And of course,
I was just going to say, and we're talking about the UK House of Cards, not
Yes.
the US one, where we can't talk about it.
yes, that's right. And I was actually going to say, of course, the other story with around Paul Seed is it's his dog that gave Tom Baker the bite on
Was
the
it
lip.
really?
Yes.
Oh.
That you can see in some scenes and not in others. So
Yes.
it gives you a bit of an idea what sequence it was shot in.
Yes, and particularly on the DVD on a large screen, you can see the very heavy amount of makeup they've applied over that scar, which apparently was incredibly painful, and why they didn't cover it up in Pirate Planet.
Yes.
How did Tom have a sausage or something like that? Was it
So
dog?
Yeah.
so Paul Seed had the trick where he put the sausage on his lip, and the dog would bite it off. And Tom, after a few drinks, said, "I can do that," but positioned the sausage incorrectly, so the dog took his top lip as well. We shouldn't laugh, but yes.
And then they write the moment in Pirate Planet where he actually bangs his face on
Oh,
the,
yes, that's right.
on the
yeah.
console and then
Yeah.
comes up with the mark on his lip.
Yeah,
Yes.
being a big finish around all that.
Yeah.
The box set coming soon.
The sausage man.
Yeah.
So, Richard, do you have any other notes for us?
We'll do the usual this quick thing about how it was screened here.
Hit it, Statman. Hit it.
As I mentioned earlier, this was screened straight after Invasion of Time, so we went from season 15 straight into season 16.
In colour. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, even in the colonies we had colour, Mark. This one first screened in Australia in early April 1979, on the 4th of April, in fact, in Perth, which was the first screening of Part 1. Now, the screenings of Invasion of Time just before this were slightly staggered between states, which had a flow-on effect for the screenings of season 16. the ABC were broadcasting the Test cricket from Perth against Pakistan. Now, for cricket or history buffs, at this point the ABC still had the rights for official Australian Test matches, as we're in the period where Kerry Packer's World Series cricket competition is competing with the ABC for the rights to screen, and his unofficial Test matches, or super tests, are being shown. This actually is right near the end of that. The truce, as they call it, which is basically Kerry Packer got everything he wanted.
And paid $1 in tax.
Was announced about a month later. So we are right at the end of the World Series cricket era. Anyway, look, the ABC at this time, they were showing the Test cricket from Perth, and because of the time difference between Western Australia and the rest of the country, the late afternoon, early evening programming in different states had to be adapted to commentate. So there was a few days where Doctor Who wasn't on.
What?
So was it network back then, or was it simply getting one tape or multiple tapes, shipped around the country?
No, so season 15, and we did talk about this a little bit way back when we did Horror Fang Rock.
Right.
But you can go and listen to that, Mark. But
I should actually,
season 15 is the first time Australia was all synchronised. Because of obviously things happening in each state, they did stagger some of the screenings. Anyway, look, early April is about 7 months after the UK.
That's not bad.
Yep, which
That's
is pretty
very
good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
The ABC started Doctor Who for 1979 with season 15, as I said. These screenings were accompanied by the goodies. That's the first time they were paired. At the start of the season 15 run, the goodies replaced repeats of a number of kids' series. Things like Hill of the Red Fox, if anyone remembers that. Little Vic. No. Eagle of the Ninth, I think, was another one.
No.
No, don't know.
No, and Doctor Who replaced that other stalwart, the Ghost and Mrs. Muir. Now, after season 16 had finished, so we get to the Armageddon factor, the ABC went into a short run of Pertwee stories, and then back into their comfort zone of Philip Hinchcliffe.
Season 12?
Yes, Philip Hinchcliffe era stories. They went from Robot through to Mandragora. And Doctor Who ended for the year in late October. And guess what? Back came the Ghost and Mrs. Muir for the summer. One final thing. Once they've run out of the goodies, and these are series you might remember, the ABC then drifted into the David Nixon Magic Show, if you remember those. No, that was the grey-haired chap who used to do, on-screen magic? No?
No.
You remember David Nixon from the UK?
I remember Paul Daniels, not big though.
No, David Nixon, no.
No.
What I think are the final repeats of Anna and the King, which was the
wow.
sitcom.
God.
Yeah, the sitcom version of The King and I.
Jesus.
It's had Yul Brynner in it.
Really?
Yes,
so
it
it
did.
was canon?
Yeah, it is. Well, don't smoke. Whatever you do, just don't smoke. And then they... and then they went into my favourite Martian.
Oh, God.
So, and actually not long after this, that was when they did that 60-minute version of the Brain of Morbius. That was a few months later. That was January 1980.
Yeah. That ran for, did you say 6 minutes or 60 minutes?
60 minutes.
Okay, right, yeah.
And even then it was on at 9:30 at night. Too horrific for Australian kids.
Yeah.
Different times. Times.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Rob, do you want to introduce the novel?
Yes, well, I have in my hot hand here the Ribos Operation.
Oh, yes.
For years and years and years, I used to call it the Ribos Operation.
So did I.
Because clearly I hadn't actually seen the story.
Right.
Anyway, it's written by that stalwart, that great actor, that wonderful writer, Ian Marter. And it's got actually one of the better covers.
It's a pretty good interpretation of the Shrivens on the cover there.
Just giving him due credit, it's John Geary who's done the front cover, so it's quite good. Tom looking very regal there. What do we think of the novelisation for those who've read it? It comes in at, look at that, 143 pages, which is quite long.
I remember, I think probably having it read to me as a kid rather than reading it as a kid, and it definitely felt denser than your typical Target novel of that era. I can remember as a kid finding it quite difficult to get into the story. And it's also got that Ian Marter trope of, shall we say, being slightly adaptive with the text.
Yes.
And so for example, it's not called The Tracer in there, and a bunch of other things. It's quite, not quite different, but it is different enough that a nerdy kid would notice.
Right.
He says also, "I'm the Graffinder, you bastard." I do remember the cover though.
Yeah, I do.
I do remember the cover because in my high school library, they obviously had the Doctor Who, shelf there like that, and that was always on the front, sort of little being displayed. So that, but I can't even remember reading it. I don't think I even had read it.
But doesn't it prove the point that on the cover of the novelisation, they don't have the graph, they don't have Garen and Unstoff, they don't have the scenery, they have the Shrivenzel that's in it for about 30 seconds altogether.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because the monster sells.
Yeah,
That's
that's right.
Have you read the book, Rob? Do you remember reading it?
I would have read it, definitely. There was a period, when I started high school in 1984, our school library had lots and lots of these, and I went through a period of just ploughing through them, so definitely would have read this. I mean, just looking at even the opening paragraph, it does actually, it expands and deepens the opening of the episode. Marta is a great writer.
Yes.
And it's a pity that he died when he did, because there were, he could have moved on and done some really good things. But it's really good. It's a really good story.
Can you imagine Ian Marta writing for the New Adventures? That would have been awesome, wouldn't it? Yeah.
He actually would have been very good, yes.
He would have been
He
really
would have known
good,
how to get the
actually.
taste of with almonds. So anyway,
I think it's cola nuts, Rob, isn't it?
no, it's almonds.
Have you read the book, Richard?
I would have read it. I don't really remember reading it, but
Thank you for that in-depth review.
I'm sure it was great, and I'm sure I enjoyed it when I did.
Very good.
All right, well, we've been having a good chat. We'll move then into closing points. Mark.
Look, I'm glad I watched it again. I really enjoyed watching it. I think actually watching it with a couple of blokes like you elevated it, as opposed to me, by myself watching it. The dialogue was sparkling, and obviously the gin was good too. Look, it was nice to watch some classic. I've been watching actually quite a little bit of classic Doctor Who, and this has really added to the feast that I've been engorging on. So I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was great. I mean, certainly better than King's Bloody Demons. That's all I can say. That was great.
The Awakening.
Pretty on par.
About on par? Yeah, righto.
No, but it's great. Yeah, really good story. Enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, look, I had fun watching it. It's got, as you said, some great dialogue. It's maybe a little indifferent in places, and I think it does slow down probably as you get into the latter part of the story. But I had fun watching that. It was great watching it with you guys.
Yes.
God love you.
Now, Rob, it's been fantastic to have you joining us on the couch with Camp David. It's good to have the full 42 to Doomsday team united. Our 4 segments of the... Well, I don't know where I was going with that metaphor, but...
Just put your tracer away, Dave.
What did you think?
Look, it was great actually watching it with you guys. I echo what everyone else has said. Wonderfully written dialogue, wonderful characterisation in the main part, a well realised world, studio bound. You can't go wrong really, as long as you spend the money and everything's fine with that. I thought Mary Tam was really good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I thought Tom Baker, after watching him in the Image of the Fendale a couple of weeks ago, I thought this is the moment where he's off the chain. He's actually not quite off the chain. Look, it's anyone who hasn't seen it in a long while, go back and spend a couple of hours, because you'll be well rewarded with a really well told story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything really to add to that. I enjoyed it. Yes, it dragged in a couple of places more than I maybe expected, but there was dialogue where we all genuinely laughed out loud. And that makes for a really fun adventure. So yeah, I'm glad I watched it, and thank you to the listeners for voting for it. On that note, we will shortly be putting up our poll to vote for our next Gin and TARDIS, where we said we were all going to nominate what we called a challenge to be interpreted whichever way we wanted. So, Mark, what are you going to nominate?
Which will? No, sorry, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go with the Crotons.
Ooh, Robert Holmes.
Robert Holmes again.
Yes. And Philip Maddock.
Yeah, Philip Maddock.
And we haven't done a Troughton, so...
very good.
That'll be my challenge. I was going to say, let's make it even more challenging without any gin, but I think with the Crotons we're going to need it, so I forget that better.
Richard?
I'm actually going to go all the way back to the start. I'm going to go with An Unearthly Child.
Oh.
And yes, Steph Coburn, because we have the DVDs.
I was going to say, we need his permission, don't we?
Perhaps influenced by the Doctor Who that has been out over the last couple of weeks, I've decided to go for a Colin and challenge us to watch The Mark of the Rani.
Oh.
And Rob, hopefully you'll be back next time. What are you putting forward?
I'm putting forward, quite simply, Doctor Who, the TV movie.
Oh. Well dressed for the occasion for that one, Robbie.
That's just sort of skirting the edges of the boundaries we put on this, Rob. But
no, it's okay.
Well, I think as far as New Who's concerned, Paul McGann is now a classic Doctor.
yes,
so,
well, that's true. And it's got Sylvester McCoy in it, so...
So, fair enough. So, the Crotons, An Unearthly Child, The Mark of the Rani, and the telemovie. That poll will be up on Twitter soon. Gents, good to have both of you from 42 to Doomsday here. You have had an episode out recently.
Yes, we interviewed the authors about the evolution of the Dalek toy book. That was a couple of weeks ago. So if you haven't checked that out, please check our feeds. And I'm still on X occasionally pointing some bile at people who upset me. But yes, we'll be doing an episode in a couple of weeks, I'm pretty sure. We have, I think we've got a drag from the archives ready to go, haven't we? We've been dragging through our archives, so we're going to do 1983 Part 1. So it's 42 years late, but who cares?
Excellent. So keep an eye out on the 42 to Doomsday feed. Keep an eye out for the Spacefall feed, because I know, Richard, you're beaving away on editing some episodes, so we'll have some more soon. But until then, thanks for joining us. If you're listening to this as it comes out, you'll have just heard our final hot take. You'll have heard our alternate galaxies on Andor Series 2. And coming up next week, we have our list makers on top 5 Davo stories, where it's not impossible we're going to have 5 snaps. I'm predicting that now.
I'm guaranteeing.
And then, of course, we'll have our monthly show after that, which will be a cold take, looking back with a more analytical view at the last season of Doctor Who.
My condolences.
But we'll be back at some point to watch whatever you vote for on Gin and TARDIS. Until then, I've been Dave.
I've been Rob.
I've been not grumpy.
I'm Richard.
And we'll speak again soon.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
See you, Grumpy.
Dave pours the gin, Mark brings the snacks. Richard's got theories and Blu-rays and stacks. They're watching Ribos, it's classic and weird. Fur hats and plot twists, and Rob's grown a beard. The White Guardian shines like a lamp in a tux. Sends the dog questing, no pressure, good luck. Dave says great, now the holiday's canned, while Ramona appears with a smug little stand. Oh Ribos, come Ribos, you frosty old bull, with monsters and conmen and no heat at all. They're sipping their gin, shouting run doctor run. Watching old telly has never been this fun. Stuff climbs down with some meat on a string. The beast snores away, not suspecting a thing. Garon's old charm with a Somerset voice. Richard said, if I grifted, that'd be my choice. The graph is all rage and over the top. Rob joked, he shops where space Nazis shop. Sholok looks bored, he's seen it before, and the shriveled tail's lurking behind a big door. Oh Ribos, weird Ribos with secrets and snow, and a creature that bites if you walk too slow. They're topping their drinks, yelling, duck, he's behind, while the plot takes a turn, or 6, they don't mind. Binro's got maps of the stars and the night. Mark nods his head, this one's alright. Dave grins and paws with a wink and a grin to outcasts who hold on through thick and thin. The graph lifts his lid and goes full kaboom. The seeker says death and clears out the room. The doctor, disguised, pulls a cheeky old switch, and Garum gets robbed by the clever slick trick. Oh Ribos, grand Ribos with jewels and deceit, and Time Lords in scarves who land on their feet. Just 4 blokes with gin and a sofa to share, singing only 5 left, and we'll binge without care.